We are so back. Welcome to Season 2 of Four Strings and the Truth. And as of now, it's a mini-season, one that's stacked with some monosyllabically named bass heroes, but I'm sure it will stretch out as we get more folks on the docket. We are kicking off with a bang, though. Today, Mr. Lewis Knox Barlow, bassist, songwriter, guitarist, band leader, and all-around genial dude, gets on the mic. I won't rant too long here because it's a long, semi-discursive, but hopefully fascinating chat that feels to me a bit like a therapy session with someone you've never met. We'd been trying to talk for a while, but all those pesky bands he's in, Dinosaur before and after the Junior, Sebadoh, indie hitmakers, folk implosion, etc., keep reuniting and touring and whatnot. And then when he's home, he's spending all his time podcasting and working up elaborate versions of jingles from the 1970s. Nonetheless, we did manage to make it happen, and so here we go. Lou Barlow, welcome to Four Strings and the Truth. It's really great to have you here. I've been a fan of your musical output since I purchased the Dinosaur self-titled album, pre-Junior, 1985. Mm-hmm. I was in college at the time trying to start working on a music paper my friends had started and writing columns for the daily paper. And I tracked down Gerard Kozloy from Homestead, the label, mm-hmm. and I called him and I said, hey, I'd love to interview this band or, have them come play on campus. And he goes, oh yeah, okay. And he gives me Jay's number.
Yeah.
And I called Jay at around, I think it was like probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I don't know why I remember that. He so barely responded to me, and we just had a very quick conversation. And then I called Gerard back and I go, I don't know, man. I think I woke him up. He was sleeping or something. And he's like, no, that's just how he is. And then a year or so later, you guys and Das Damen came down to New Haven to play. A local band that I'd started managing called Bleach Black opened. And it was at Yale's graduate school bar called the Gypsy Bar.
Okay.
Some acronym.
Yeah,
you might not remember. I know you did a few dates with Das Damen.
I know I was there. I know it happened. We had played, I have a vague memory of that, but I mean, it doesn't, that doesn't mean anything.
It was a bit ago. Yeah, like 40 years.
Yeah.
But it was, people sometimes ask me what was the loudest show you've ever been to, and that's top 5 easily.
Mm.
And, I definitely lost some hearing that night, and I'm grateful to you for every lost decibel.
Right.
I was so excited to see you back with Dinosaur. We're going to talk about a lot of things in this interview, but okay. I just, I found it so beautiful on so many levels as a fan, as a musician who's dealt with band dynamics, and just as a middle-aged gentleman for whom your music meant a lot. Here's one more reminiscence. When you guys played 2013 Riot Fest, my son and I bought tickets. I was really excited because it was the Replacements reunion year. Mm-hmm. He was really excited for that, but more so for bands like yourself and Guided by Voices, and like Brand New was headlining or playing a high on the bill. And I walked in and it was just like this beautiful wall of noise to see the 3 of you together. And I was like taken right back to that, Gypsy bar in 1985. How are the dynamics now in the band? What's it like when you're in Dinosaur mode on the road or recording now?
It's the same, but with minus animosity, minus baggage, or much less. It's very much the same. I mean, the way I play with Murph it was something that we forged when we were teenagers. It's a very physical way of playing. The connection I have with him is so unique.
Yeah.
It's like the way he's playing are connected to my limbs are connected to his somehow. I think it's kind of a cliche to refer to bands as brothers, or familial. And I've always thought that was a little overstated, but the longer that I've stayed with Dinosaur Jr., the more that it actually feels that way. Because you could have, I could have 2 brothers, and one brother I talk to a lot, the other one I don't. You don't see him that often. You know what I mean? It's very, it
It's like a
feels that
real
way.
family, an actual family.
Like an actual family, like one that we get together for special occasions, which happen to be shows. And that's my relationship to Jay and Murph. And the longer that we go, the less I care about how strange our dynamic can be. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but I think I've described it.
Sometimes we sway, couldn't have it.
You know, the one aspect I'm very curious about is the partitioning of the songs that you contribute to the more recent Dinosaur records. You know, Garden and stuff, these are like new classics for the band. And when I hear those songs on the more recent recordings, it is so gratifying to me. So I'm wondering, is there a pre-proportioned amount of songs that you contribute, or is it?
Yeah. It's 2 songs. You know, I think it's the classic amount. I mean, the classic bass player amount of songs. I think Jay initially, really, after writing the first record, he did want me to sort of become more of a writer in the band. And so for the second record, I did what I could for that record and came up with 2 songs for that. And then by the third record, I was so cowed by him.
Yeah.
So intimidated, and honestly felt I felt ugly. I felt so small around him. I could not even muster. I couldn't bring my little songs to him. I just could not bear the weight of his attention at that point. So, but I think when I rejoined the band, it was like, yeah, it was just assumed that I would snap back into the 2 songs per album that we had. The only record that we had done that on was "You're Living All Over Me," but that was our best record. So,
I mean, it's a life-changing record.
So I think I think when we got back together, it was kind of assumed that I'd chip in too, and I always come with like, 3 songs, maybe one becomes maybe a B-side, 2 songs make it onto the record.
Talking about "You're Living All Over Me," what a life-changing record it was. Well, Polita was kind of a life-changing song for you in many ways, right?
Yeah.
First of all, I remember reading or listening to one of your interviews, and you'd mentioned that they were like, at one point you heard voices in your head urging you to present the song to Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing a lot of home recording.
Yes.
In the mid-'80s, and it really kicked in when I got a good job at a nursing home. When I say good, it was like I was getting good pay, which is like, upwards to $10 an hour, which was fantastic, when
above the current minimum wage.
Yes. Yeah, well above. I think at that point it was 4 or 5. So yeah, I was, but working, and what's on "You're Living All Over Me" is not a 4-track. It's sort of a makeshift 2-track that I had made by wiring, or just using adapters to connect a portable tape recorder to a console cassette deck, and then from there was doing this very crude layering. And I had this incredible mescaline trip. I took, it was artificial, what would you call it? Like synthetic mescaline. So a synthetic version of mushrooms, like in a little purple dotted pill. It was, I think it was wasn't my first psychedelic experience. I mean, I had some wonderful experiences with weed after high school. I was straight edge during high school, sort of, concurrent with my obsession with, hardcore punk rock. It was just sort of seemed necessary. And also I just, hadn't done drugs, so I didn't miss them or understand what function that they could have. But
with concurrent with Deep Wound, you were
exactly.
straight edge,
and then when I graduated high school and smoked weed and just was like, I couldn't believe music was the way things opened up to me, and it gave me a lot of confidence, honestly. It made me really, I really embodied my music at that point. I like got really into, listening to my own songs and really starting to experiment. And I took this purple microdot and had this incredible trip where I just listened to music and just continued to record and layer things in my room. And I just had this epiphany, like, this will be my life. Because I struggled with music because I never fit into I thought all of being able to play really well, and I thought like classic rock and all this virtuosity was not really what I identified with. And I think when I heard Neil Young for the first time, when you start to realize it's not all based on virtuosity, it's actually, there's, it's equal components of honesty and determination and style. And also at the same time discovering Bob Dylan and realizing that, Bob could barely play guitar. And, and I made the separation between Pink Floyd, Van Halen, and these things. And somehow, and I think, and then through the use and through like marijuana and then a few really, really fine psychedelic experiences, I thought there was room for me in the world. And when I had that realization and I began assembling this sort of sprawling collage that became Polito, I was like, I have to approach Jay and ask him if I can put this on the Dinosaur Jr. record, a la Expecting to Fly by Neil Young on the end of a Buffalo Springfield record. Nice. A la Revolution Number 9.
Yeah.
It's like there was at that point too, discovering, the classic 60s psychedelic records and knowing that there was always one piece that's the sort of requisite psychedelic piece. And I thought this is my mission,
Nice.
And so I approached Jay and asked him and he was like, sure. We were at a good spot at that point. When we did You Living All Over Me, we were on the same page, so to speak.
Yeah, you mentioned that once you started touring, that sort of tightness sort of started, all the weirdness came out.
Yeah.
Mutual, everyone's weirdness.
Yeah, it just, that kind of intimacy was not, it was not tolerated well when we were kids, so.
Is it ever really, right?
I think it's tough. When you're stuck in a van and we had never traveled to that extent. And that's a whole different world,
Well, let's get back to tape collaging for a second. You talked about recording with your family's cassette recorder as a young kid and writing your first song, Punch in the Nose, with your cousin. And what was in the culture or perhaps in your familial upbringing that gave you the license to start doing this? Or was it completely self-actualized?
Well, it was kind of self-actualized. I think those cassette recorders were used for the purpose of making cassette letters that my father would send back to his mother in Dayton, Ohio, where it'd go like, come on, we all gather around the recorder, and my father would sort of narrate. And my father there's a performance side of him that never really was realized, but he loved to speak, and he had a kind of a very nice voice, and he could sing. All of these things were very private, but within his personal life. But when it came to making these cassette recordings from my grandmother, he took great care to do it. And now Louie's going to say something. So I think I had that this was like a way of communicating. We were living in Jackson, Michigan at the time.
Right.
My dad actually worked at Bendix Abrasives with Iggy Pop's mom.
Come on.
Actually, so I found out about Iggy when I was very young because I heard very interesting stories about Iggy doing things in the very early 70s. So I was aware of that. I was scared to death of hippies. I remember that. So rockers, hippies, all that stuff scared the shit out of me because it meant violence to me. So Dayton, I had a cousin who was pretty experimental, and he had a portable tape recorder, and he showed me on the tape recorder that if you didn't quite fully depress the record buttons, that it would speed up the tape and record at the same time. So he would create he did one thing that I remember very, very well. He recorded and he said into the tape deck, like, I'm going to beat the beep out of Louie. Like, I'm going to beat the shit out of Louie. He said beep instead. And then when he played it back, it just said, I'm going to beat the beep out of Louie. And I was like, it was like a portal had opened to me. And my cousin Mark, and he basically he handed me the keys. I was like, oh my God. And when I got home and got a hold of the family tape recorder, I went crazy. And then...
So age-wise, what are we talking here?
It would be 11, 12.
Okay.
And then I moved to Massachusetts at that time too. So I went from being, a very social kid in Michigan and being sort of doing a lot of, being into school and being involved even like in theater and playing guitar in a little group in middle school. I went to that to being a total abject loner for the rest of my teenage years. I mean, that was it. Like, when I moved to Massachusetts, I immediately stayed in my room, and it was my room and the cassette tape recorder, and then concurrently with that, I was also obsessed with AM radio when I was living in Michigan. When I moved to Massachusetts, I decided to check out the FM dial. So I started all the way at the left of the dial and inched the tuner, and I fucking heard Holiday in Cambodia on WHUS Stores.
Hell yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? I thought it was Jimi Hendrix when I heard it. I'm like, there was nothing else that I had ever heard in my life that sounded so aggressively psychedelic, because Jimi Hendrix was like, that was it. That was the most extreme music that I knew of, like Manic Depression, I Don't Live Today. That was the most extreme music that I was aware of, and that was so emotionally charged and just trippy. Jimi Hendrix was really the epitome of what just this really, and you'd seen the footage of him, but anyway, hearing the Dead Kennedys, I did not know what had hit me. And from then, I was exclusively left of the dial. I discovered probably 15 college radio stations. WMUA, the University of Massachusetts, they had shows like with guys, like a guy from England had a show, and he called it Capital Radio, and he brought every import and played it every Sunday at fucking, 11 o'clock at night. And so I heard like hot off the fucking, like within a week of being released, like Love Will Tear Us Apart.
Hell yeah.
The Cure, like Heaven 17, like synth pop, fucking, and the UK subs, like punk, everything. And a young Jay Mascis also had a radio show on WMUA as well. So I heard Jay's voice, and Jay was very obsessed with UK hardcore,
right? Yeah,
and like really early,
GBH,
like Discharge, Oi, GBH. I can never talk too little about how incredible college radio was to me, and then what really kicked it on WMUA, there was a show midnight on Sundays called Data Vision that sort of implored listeners to send in tapes, because they had a Data Vision top 10 where they would play local artists. What I didn't understand was it was only just the guys who did the radio show in different names.
Just like radio today, most of the callers are. Yeah.
So I thought So I was like, I made a compilation of like all my best songs, in my opinion, which were all really topped out at about 30 seconds long. So I sent them a tape and called it Lou B. And they fucking played me. I made it to number 3 on the Dottovision Top 10 with a song called I Love Me, which was just me chanting, I love me, like over and over again. And they fucking played it.
Did you tape it when it was on air?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you probably have that tape somewhere still.
I don't know. I might have recorded it over because cassette tapes were at such a premium for me. But I did actually record a lot of things on the big 8-track Ka-chunk tapes too. That was the first things that I did. I actually used those that I recorded into because the console of the 8-track had a mic input, and then I could do an input through the back of the cassette, the console as well. So I could do a really crude version of 2-track recording onto these 8-track big plastic cassettes. So that's what I did.
I didn't even, but the stuff on like Weed Forest and the stuff, your first sort of was under your first release while you were still in Dinosaur. Yeah. And it was under Sebadoh, right? Weed Forest, or what did you call it?
It was under Sebadoh.
So, but that was all cassette stuff, right?
That was cassette. Although some of it is the crude 2-track.
Oh.
Yeah, some of it is crude pre-4-track.
Okay.
Then I got a 4-track. I got my first 4-track, and then I leveled up and got a Tascam Porta 1.
Yeah.
By the time
classic.
By the time I was completed the Weed Forest and tape.
I feel your eyes upon me. How should I activate to feel so unsure always? Give up on now, keep on this way.
Bass-wise, you had mentioned Greg Norton's playing on Diane. The way the bass line kind of poked through the noise of that beautiful song was an early influence. And you mentioned Holiday in Cambodia. You said very psychedelic, which sounds to me like you're almost referencing East Bay Ray's like incredibly distinct reverb. He was the first guy in punk to play without. He didn't really have distortion. It was just like insane amounts of like reverb.
And it was really I realized it much later, but it's more of a surf. It was more of a surf,
right.
Rockabilly way of. But what he did, it's pretty incredible what he did. And the Dead Kennedys were just they were so music. I think that's one of the first things that I heard where I was like, oh, this is easily as good as any of the classic rock shit that my classmates are listening to. This is musically accomplished.
Yeah.
This is sophisticated. This is like super sophisticated. And I think that was the kind of a thing that nudged me into it as well. I was like, oh, this punk is not, it is actually, it's really sophisticated.
It's many things, yeah.
The music is very sophisticated. And I think, I'd heard Flipper shortly after that, which were, that too, I was like, well, no one can replicate what Ted Falcone did to a guitar. You don't even know what he did. You cannot even, no one can imitate it when people play. I'm like, when you enter that, and no one, in my estimation, really imitated Johnny Ramone. So I became really what punk was rhythmically, and how hardcore and how all of these regional scenes had almost different rhythmic stamps.
Yeah.
I got very, very obsessed with strumming. I was like, this is it. I was like, this is my way in. This is what I don't want weedly and I want these sort of very idiosyncratic walls of sound that almost every guitar player in early hardcore before the playing became sort of regimented and standardized. I think Minor Threat were wonderful. They were a wonderful band. I loved them so much, but they formalized the style that, in my opinion, immediately made hardcore 50% less interesting post 1984, because before that, these styles all were very different, and it was really interesting. And I that was what I became obsessed with, was strumming. So, and then hearing Greg Norton playing, I mean, the bass line for Diane, I remember distinctly seeing them play that live, I think before Metal Circus came out, and just hearing that churning underneath talk about loudest shows I've ever seen.
Just
standing in front of Bob's.
That's in my top 5 as well.
Just standing in front of his fucking Yamaha or whatever that head was. But I mean, that was the blueprint for Dino.
You've mentioned, obviously Lemmy a lot in terms of strumming. I'm wondering, was he also an influence in the fact, I think when I saw you, you were still playing your Rick. And was that a big, was he instrumentally an influence? Was that a function of, I want to sound like Lemmy, or I actually have access to a Rickenbacker?
Well, it started with a Gibson grabber.
Right.
And, which is what people actually think on, because that's what I played on the first Dinosaur record and half of You're Living All Over Me. And what the songs on You're Living All Over Me that people think are a Rick, they're not. It's the grabber.
Like In a Jar?
In a Jar, Raisins, My Song Lose.
Great song.
You're Living All Over Me is kind of a reverse chronological order.
I see.
Thing. So it starts with the what we had recorded, the newest recordings that we had done in New York with Wharton Tears, and that's on a Rick. That's on the Rick that I bought a Rick because I had the money and I traded in my grabber. And
so you traded it in? You didn't?
I traded it in.
The concept of having 2 basses was just.
I still have that.
You talk about how little equipment you have. I know.
I don't know. I can't collect. I can't.
When you're on the road with Dinosaur, you have a backup bass, right?
I have a backup bass.
If you break your string. But is it also the same type of ripper? You're still...
Jay actually bought another grabber, so...
Grabber, yeah.
So we do have a grabber that's almost the same as... Anyway, a lot of really cool bass players played a Rick. It was just sort of like, the Rick is the coolest. It was just, it looks cool.
It does look cool.
It has the most distinctive sound, but ironically... the Rick was had the least amount of personality of the bass between the grabber and the Rick that I played on You're Living All Over Me. I would say the grabber had much more personality on recorded.
I see.
Live it was different because the Rick actually had real meat to it live, but not recorded. Recorded it was more generic sounding. But,
I mean, you had early Mike Mills, you had...
totally.
And Bruce Foxton, the Gem, they were all Rick band for a while until later on he switched. Yeah, and you heard that tone, and that's what you associated with the Rick. But I agree. I think it's harder to capture on tape for some reason.
Yeah.
In Our Band Could Be Your Life, Michael Azerrad's canonical book about 80s underground music. And it really is. I mean, I know Michael, I love him, but that book is just so important. With regard to Jay and the start of Dinosaur, you said something like, I really accepted my service to his songs, which is a really interesting way of looking at things. And as a podcast about bass players, probably a pretty understandable sentiment. Would you have picked up bass as a key instrument if Jay hadn't implored you to do so when he was starting Dinosaur with you?
I might have, yeah. And there's a few reasons for that. Is that when I did write my own songs, when I started to write them, I wrote the vast majority of them on guitars with less than 6 strings. And my mother had she got a baritone ukulele at a tag sale and brought it to me like, here, Louie, I think maybe you can do something with this. And I immediately restrung it with much heavier, like classical guitar strings on a baritone ukulele. six strings has always totally intimidated me. Even when I played guitar, that's one reason that I gravitated to the strumming was it was a way to like, when you played all of the strings and not, because I hated bar chords and I hated the two finger chords that people did and what passed. I mean, that was one of the great ironies to me, I thought, is that heavy metal music, it didn't use enough strings for me. Like you couldn't hear, all the chords were constructed out of like 2 to 3 fingers, maybe, and then just a lot of whittly diddly. Whereas Johnny Ramone literally like was taking every fucking string and making it sing like a goddamn, orchestra, this fucking orchestra through a blown speaker. But when I began to really start writing my own songs, and like the songs on Polito, Polito is all 4-string guitar.
Oh, I thought it was ukulele. Oh, wow.
Well, it is. I mean, it's a ukulele, but the way that I strung it.
Oh, it is. Okay, is it the $5 one that your mom picked up?
Like that. But that's with like. But it's not the ukulele stringing. It's two the heavy strings and the 2 of the light strings. So it has a really different sound. It doesn't sound like a ukulele. It is a baritone ukulele. But to me, it was more just like a guitar that I could play because I just didn't have it gave me more facility to play because I could really grab. And so when Jay said, when Deep Wound broke up, when he dissolved Deep Wound, I was a senior in high school. He was beginning his freshman year at UMass. And he was like, you should, for our next band, you should play bass. And I thought, oh, okay. So I got a bass, and I started playing in a band with my high school. The guys that I ate lunch with in high school, we started a band, and that was the first band that I really played bass in. It's hard to tell. I don't know the exact, because I know our little high school band, played at UMass when Jay was there, and Jay saw that show.
What was it called? The high school band?
Wayne and the Wangs. Wayne and the Wangs.
That's why you didn't mention it. Okay.
Yeah, and the guy Wayne, he was like our songwriter. He was, of
course,
he was one of the early speed metal adopters because at that point, Metallica was starting. Metallica was, 83.
Yeah,
it was coming. Like the speed metal revolution was coming. But that was one thing that I thought was so funny. Wayne really, God bless him, really exemplified this to me. I was like, oh, heavy metal is for people who are very particular, who strum like just these tiny little wrist motions with the little pick there, and they play their chords are just 2 notes, and it's all very meticulous. I just thought that heavy metal was meticulous, and it really imprinted on me because I'm like, I don't want meticulous. I want fucking messy and huge and almost just uncontrollable. There was a band called Void from DC they were really instrumental, so to speak. They were like a metal influenced hardcore band, but they just sounded so fucking off the hook. It was like every song was like a train. Everyone's running at a different tempo. This band is incredible. But I decided, I think at that point, like Jay and I both were like, we're not going the Metallica route. We're not going the Metal Force records. We're not
going fast. We're going slower.
We're not going slow. We're going slower and heavier and and then at that same point, it's like I had been tuned into like, I had been aware of the New York underground, like sort of no wave scene just from radio and from the New York Rocker magazine. So I was really, I'd heard about this band Sonic Youth, and I was like, because I knew about Glenn Branca, Bush Tetras, the Contortions, I knew about all that stuff. And then I was like, oh man, there's this band Sonic Youth, and they apparently are on the bloodline from that music. And so I was obsessed with Sonic Youth before I ever heard them. And then when I heard them, I was like, oh yeah. And I'm like, they were everything I wanted them to be, which is like a really rare occurrence when you build up something in your mind, especially back then, I'm sure you relate to this, is when you read about things and you imagine what they are, you would do that back then because you had no access to the music unless you could get to the right record store, or you stumbled on the right like mail order, and then also had the disposable cash to actually make these calculated guesses of what things would sound like. But Sonic Youth really delivered, and they also were not fully 6 strings, and they were also alternate tunings, because I used alternate tunings for all the songs that, like for Polito, that my songs on that are all with 4 strings and different tunings. So the long story short is that when Jay told me that he wanted me to play bass, I'm like, great. That's 4 strings is all I need. I don't want any more than that, because I can do that. I can do 4 strings. I can take control of 4 strings. So, yeah.
You just gave me my pull quote for the interview, and I appreciate it. Nowadays, today, 2025, do you have a preferred compositional instrument? Is it the same stuff you've been using? When you're thinking about writing, how does it work in your head? If you have an idea for a melody or a song, does that happen in the clear in your head and then you have to pick up something to actualize it? Or are you just constantly playing, strumming, and then all of a sudden something starts happening?
Oh, it's really both, actually. It's both.
But is there one, you don't reach for a bass when you have a song idea, do you?
I have.
Good.
But no, that's as far as the songs go, that would be the one that I've written the least, starting with the bass. But I can say that I start with 4 strings. I do that.
We'll take it.
Because I began adapting guitars to a 4-string tuning really early on, like in the 80s, electric guitars. And then I've sort of fine-tuned that into, I have 12-string guitars that I've reduced to a 4-string tuning, but I double the top heavy strings.
Right.
So I use a standard 6 pack of 6 strings, but for a 4-string tuning on a 12-string guitar. That's like where I've ended up as far as writing songs on. That's what I've reached after. And the next step would have someone like a luthier make me a guitar, but no one, I don't have enough juice to have anybody do that for me yet. So
I don't know about that.
I don't. I've tried, and yeah, I don't know. I'd have to really talk to somebody.
I know a few luthiers who might be interested.
But I have to pay them. I don't want to pay anybody.
No, you don't. You're Lou Barlow. You probably don't have to pay them.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I knew everything about you, but I knew nothing about
I think it's fair to say that you think an awful lot about how you approach things musically. I mean, we barely started talking about any of your actually recorded output because we're having such a good time talking about like the influences and stuff. Something that came up in some of the more recent interviews with the folk implosion, the tour and stuff, is how that you and John, when you tend to talk things out a lot. You did back in the day, and you did when you kind of reunited. And you guys have that in common. You said the best things are made when you really collaborate with somebody. So who serves the role of collaborator if you're making a solo record?
Myself.
Yeah.
I can explain that. My last solo record is called Reason to Live, and it came out, pandemic. There are a few songs on there that I started writing when I was a teenager. And one song in particular uses an element, like a riff that I had recorded on a portable cassette player in 1983. When I had done it as a kid, I was like, there's a song there, there's a melody. And I never really realized it, but I carried it with me through years and years and years. And I actualized it, in 2020. And it was very much like collaborating with this version of myself. And because so many of the songs that I do write have come together over decades, to me, that's the closest thing I can get to, like, it's the closest thing to, collaborating, because I am collaborating with this totally different version of myself, and collaborating with just time passing and perspective, because my perspective, obviously all of our perspectives, evolve and change through years and years. So in that way, I'm fortunate in that the songs that I bring to the table, to anything that I do, they're songs that are in my head. I mean, maybe they started by me jamming on something and capturing it, but I only really follow through on things that stay in my head without re-listening to things. So I have a lot of like melodies, ideas, and songs, like kind of in varying states of completion in my head. I'm working on a Dinosaur Jr. record now, and one of the riffs I wrote initially to maybe be a Dinosaur Jr. song in 1985, but it never found the right thing. But now I'm like, oh, I think it's ready. I think it's actually here. So, and then I also liked the idea when marijuana was really working for me. There was such a radical difference between, I could sit and write something and compose something completely straight. And then when I would hear it when I was high, it was like, hey, I'm a different person. Because you immediately hear it. It's the perspective shifts. It's all about the perspective. And collaboration really is about like people with different perspectives coming together. And marijuana was this wonderful shortcut to make myself my own collaborator. But being very strict about it, but being like, I have to spend the time sober to do this and the time not sober to do that, and kind of hand off between my two personas, But yeah, I still have that real deep, collaboration is really, it's such a tough little balance to keep, and it is really rare,
I did want to ask about a live collaboration question, which is you guys, Dinosaur, in terms of doing some of these residencies to celebrate different releases, you have some incredible special guests joining you. I've seen just footage. I've been at a couple of them, just like insane. Do you have one that's particularly memorable? Not in the like, what's your favorite one, but more like, what was it like to have Kevin Shields come out and play with you guys? Well, stuff like that.
Yeah, Kevin definitely was a big one. Really fun. We've done it a couple of times with him, and we do kind of a deep cut with him, Thorn, which was a big favorite of ours. Like when we first, there was kind of a meeting of the minds of My Bloody Valentine and Dinosaur Jr., Jay and Kevin in particular, in 1988,
right,
when they actually met. And I think I knew of My Bloody Valentine before they became what we understand My Bloody Valentine to be. They had a different sound. They were a different kind of band. And I remember being in Brighton, England, and hearing You Made Me Realize for the first time, and having this shock of like, oh my God, they've heard Dinosaur Jr. Like, I'm like, oh my God, that we've
reached across the sea.
Something has happened. Like, when I realized that Jay's sensibility, it was being digested and it was being fed back to us. The idea, the exchange was beginning to happen. We had made our mark. Like You're Living All Over Me had put us into the flow and we had our boat in the river, basically.
Yeah.
So playing Thorn with Kevin was definitely, but we did, there's two others that just leaped to my mind. One is we like Jay and I played in a free land with Bob Mould, and it was like, because Jay played drums, and
is this on YouTube?
I think so.
Okay, good. Well, it'll be in our show notes.
We did a damn good version of it, and I'm like, and I sang backing vocals.
Oh wow!
And and Jay did the kind of D beat sort of pre-beat.
Yeah.
That whole, because
Yeah.
In a Freeland 7-inch to me is like, it is the fucking holy grail. Like I love it so much. I to this day, it makes me absolutely crazy when I hear it. Every song on that fucking record.
It was a template for their entire sound. Like the influence that their sound became was all contained within that one single, I think.
And well, that's when they really, because Land Speed record was one thing. It was a bit sloppy. It was hard to totally nail the band down. In a Freeland was like, holy fuck.
Yeah,
and then,
speed, the noise, the melody, the jangle.
I mean,
of the
Statues too. I mean, they were such an interesting band because their first single was more like almost like it had that really awesome it was like more like Flipper, San Francisco, kind of this churning, ominous thing. And then Land Speed record, which was, I think, at the time, we hardcore fans, we of the burgeoning like regional scenes coming together, understood that was not the peak hardcore record of the time. There were bands, I mean, at that point it was like Bad Brains, Poison Idea. There were bands that were like really incredibly agile hardcore bands, and Land Speed record is not the best example of Husker Du. In a Freeland was the coalesce where we were like, oh, that's the band. And you're like, there it is. Like, and so to this, I was just listening to What Do I Want the other day and like going, oh my God, this song is so fun. Like I've got to do like a cover of this song for my podcast. I've got to cover
totally.
it. I want to do what I want to do is a cold wave synth cover of What Do I Want. I'm like, it's going to be fucking great. But anyway, so yeah, In a Freeland with Bob Mould. And then we did Don't, which is when I didn't bring any songs. I didn't bring any songs to Bug. So because I already said, I couldn't bear it. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't think anything I was doing was at Jay's level of songwriting at that point was so stratospheric. And he was, at that point too, he was very much like his lyrics and his music were like hand in hand, like devastating. And speaking, I mean, he was writing songs about the ambiguity, the fucking underlying violence of our entire band dynamic and our social dynamic. And his songs were incredible. And I'm like, there's no way I can match this or bring anything to him. Besides the fact he'll say something to me that he'll break my heart. I won't even be able to handle the fucking disparaging shit he's going to tell me So I didn't write any songs for that. So he put Don't, he's like, well then, here's your song.
And he assigned it to you.
He assigned it to me. Why don't you like me? So
and you're screaming your guts out.
I'm like, fine, I'll scream my guts out. It was very symbolic. And, but we did that song with Henry Rollins on vocals. Oh. Actually, we did two versions. We did one with Henry on vocals, which was like incredible. Because Henry he's a huge fan of Jay's. Like absolutely. And he is, and Henry himself, I think he would describe himself as a music fan first before anything else that he does. He's so incredibly passionate and beyond nerdy about every aspect of music. And that is his thing. And so when he did Don't with us, it was wild because Henry we knew Henry as the singer for SOA in DC before he became the Black Flag singer. So it was intense. And shortly before that, we did a version of Don't with Keith Morris on vocals. And that too was really great because he did his whole like talking in between it. It's so it was just
he's aged amazingly and vocally, like the off stuff.
Oh my God.
So good. I'm so sad
doing Don't and like as like Keith Morris as Keith Morris and Henry as Henry, as their lead vocal personas to the T, that was really, those were amazing. That was really special.
in your mode of supportive bass playing, when you play with Folk Implosion, both early on and, your big hit single, Natural One, and even more recently, I was looking at some footage because I was so pissed I missed the show at Tubby's. You're playing this short scale Fender Mustang with your fingers. I mean, if people didn't know it was, Lou Barlow from Sebadoh and from Dinosaur, they wouldn't know necessarily, they wouldn't associate the way you play bass and that sort of like 60s, very rhythmic and like clean notes and stuff with the rest of your output. Yeah, flat wounds. Oh, is
flat
that what
wounds through a flip top.
Yeah. Was that an orange? What amp was that? Oh, it was a flip top like Ampeg?
Yeah, that's like an Ampeg flip top, a vintage Ampeg flip top in the studio.
Oh, in the studio, I was going to say, I have a B15 here from 1963 that if it comes out of my studio, the tubes just self-destruct.
No,
so
I actually bought a flip top with an 18-inch speaker in it. I don't know what you call it.
B18, yeah.
Yeah, I had a B18 for a while, and I had to leave it in LA when I moved because it was...
You can't move them.
It had the old handle, so you couldn't even carry it. It was so brutal. But it also rattled like fuck. I could never get a great sound out of it. But I bought it in Boston. I was like, I have to have this.
Those amps are God, but yeah, you can't take them in the live setting. There's a guy in Beacon, New York, who like fixes tube amps, and he's just so grumpy that I'm very reluctant to play my B15 because I'm scared that it'll like a tube will pop, then I have to go up to Beacon and get yelled at by a 70-something-year-old man.
Yeah.
God, I better cut that out if he hears that, because he's going to start doubling my rate. You can only pay him in cash too. Anyway, it's another thing. And currently, when you're playing live now with Dinosaur, let's say, it sounds like you have like 3 amps going at once. Is that a fair?
I had three for a little while. I had a PV, I had a PV transistor one, because I've just always loved PV bass sound.
Oh, it's great.
I think my dream would be to not. I had the head, and it was running through a 15-inch speaker, and it never really sounded right. And then I didn't really use it, but I put it on my stack anyway, and that pissed Jay off because it was an amp. It's like, we can't have any amps that aren't firing on stage. I'm like, oh, come on.
What kind of rule is that?
Come on, man. But actually, I think what I have now, what I play through primarily is a Marshall guitar head and a really nice old SVT.
And really using the Exotic Effects BB still on the SVT? Yeah.
That's an incredibly smooth, deep. Yeah, I've never found a bass distortion that was that deep.
I have 2 related questions for you about this. One is that you've mentioned that your sound guy, or your guy that even Dinosaur sound guy, Noel, right?
Yep. Noel.
He's even older than us, or I don't know, maybe he's not, but he comes from he comes from the 60s tradition of using PAs mostly for vocals. Yeah. Are you telling me when I go see you at Riot Fest or in one of the clubs or even bigger places, most of the sound is coming off the stage from your guys' gear for the instruments?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not for a festival. No. For a festival, it would be.
Yeah, you have to.
He would use. I mean, he does put a surprising amount of the guitar actually through the PAs, almost in any situation. But he does. He's really funny because he's like, you guys are loud, but you're not Vanilla Fudge loud. That's something that he says pretty regularly. That was like, yeah, pretty loud. I mean, this guy, Noel was. He was at a 13th floor elevator's record signing when he was a teenager.
Oh my God.
He saw the Music Machine, which is insane to me because Music Machine are my absolute favorite band, bass-dominated band, by the way.
Yeah.
I would really encourage any bass player to seek out the Music Machine.
What's your favorite Music Machine song? What should we put on the episode playlist?
God. Wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then here's the related question, because I'm concerned about it, but it's probably too late. What do you do for hearing protection on stage? Or do you do nothing?
No, it was something from the very beginning.
Okay, good.
There was no way to actually process the music without earplugs. I've had you know what I mean? Like you couldn't, unless you were,
it was just too loud. Yeah.
Unless I couldn't not hear specifically what Murph is playing without earplugs.
Right.
So I've had to do that but I've had this condition beset me like maybe 5 months ago. I think it must be related to Meniere's disease, but my left ear ceased to be able to process loud sounds. And I realized what was happening when Dinosaur Jr. were rehearsing for a show on the West Coast. And what I heard coming off of Jay's guitar amp was totally horrible. Like just every note being like half a step off everything. And then also just this shimmery, broken. It was horrific. I thought my musical life was over.
Jeez.
But I kind of adapted to it. I wore the big muffs and I double plugged in, because what I do now is foam plugs, because they have this really wonderful foam that they invented maybe 15 years ago.
Right.
These they were initially called Howard Lights. Now CVS makes them as generics, but
good.
But they're foam, and the way that they cover my eardrum is really solid. And then I'll put wax earplugs over the top of that, so I get like 50 dB of
reduction.
You've
never done custom? Why wouldn't you do
that?
Custom?
Wouldn't, because they aren't strong enough. Here's the other thing. My ear canal is really weird. It's like shaped like an elbow. So it's really hard. I've had the customs, but getting it through the elbow of my fucking ear canal.
Yeah.
Because we all have just like everything else, we all have
weird
different.
Looking. Yeah.
So my earplugs are like, what is it? I have a weird like bend in my earplug, which makes inserting custom plugs difficult and not consistent. And the thing is, I could never step on stage with Dinosaur Jr. without a consistent, because if I was to walk out without an actual seal on my, my tinnitus would be crazier than it is, which it's fucking nuts.
Oh, you're still dealing with that?
Oh, tinnitus for sure. That's a given. But I don't.
But you're recovered since that event from a few months back?
It's the same, but it's just, I'm like the three-legged dog, you're like, he seems perfectly happy. I'd hope that would happen. I'm like, maybe it'll just be, I'm just, it'll be all right. I can still run, fetch. I got used to it. I mean, it's not happening. The crazy overtones aren't happening as much, but I still have this other, anyway, if anybody wants to know, I detail it in my podcast. I do.
I've listened to several episodes, but I don't think I've hit those episodes yet.
There's well over 200 episodes.
We're gonna get into your podcast, because you are one of my favorite things, a podcasting musician who actually understands the medium and is trying to bring it back to its roots in many ways.
Okay.
I haven't talked as much about Sebadoh, which it's funny because I was pretty active musically. I was also working at Atlantic Records at the time when the Sebadoh stuff was happening, and I think I was so heads down with all the stupid shit I was doing that like I didn't fully appreciate the band at the time. And then kind of like years later, and especially as I became a parent for some reason, those songs started to really resonate with me. And I was listening to the deluxe Bake Sale release recently, and the versions that you have, the acoustic versions of On Fire and Magnets Coil, to name a few, those weren't demos for the eventual electrical recordings. Were they separate recordings, or were they remixes, or were they just a different version?
Those. It depends on the song, but I made those after.
It felt like you'd finished the song and then you decided to perform it acoustically.
Yeah, they're like, we need some B-sides, so here's one.
Because those are fucking beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah, we had a house party last year, and my son and I played a version of On Fire. To me, it's like the purest form of that song.
I mean, you were asking me before, like where the songs start. I mean, they start acoustically generally.
Yeah.
So.
But the 6 strings, I mean, those riffs can be played on 4 strings.
Well, I made a conscious effort to streamline my performances in 1994. I was like, I just felt, I think I had done so much stuff on alternate tunings and different tunings, and which can be problematic.
Yeah.
And I made a conscious, I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I should just do what other people do and just fucking write on 6-string guitars, you know? So I actually took things that I had written on 4 strings and translated them into 6 strings. So like the initial riffs for Skull, Rebound, even On Fire were done on 4 strings. And I'm like, fuck it, you know.
And figure it out.
I'm going to conform. I'm taking this to Lemonhead's route, you know.
Shots fired, Evan.
I mean, the Lemonheads, at that period, I adored them. So it was like Teenage Fan Club. You know, there were bands making
also
really,
still performing and making great music, right? I mean, Jesus.
I mean, there was people making what really wonderful music in more standard, what I considered more socially acceptable ways back then. And I decided with Bake Sale, I was like, you know, I'll keep this easy for everybody and just fucking do this shit in folk chords, you know. Right,
but that was considered one of your more like breakthrough records. It was.
I mean, we did, you know, that's not that Bake Sale is not what, I mean, I have 4 songs on there, at least 4 songs that are done on 4-string guitars. So there's that. But yeah, no, that record was, Sebadoh, we had I founded the band with my buddy Eric Gaffney, and who was just a wild guy, like really, really wild, wonderfully erratic singer, songwriter, an incredible Keith Moon style drummer, super dynamic guy, but really he didn't deal well with life on the road, and he didn't deal well with the band, like the band was whatever. Eric needed his own spotlight, and he wasn't getting enough of it. So
is he playing now? Is he doing stuff now?
He kicks around Northampton, but I don't know if I get enough time at home someday. I wanted to do. I like him, but he's a little.
Yeah.
He's hard to work with.
You've talked about it, yeah. Again, like I was trying for this interview not to be too much into like I'm interested in the intra band dynamics to the extent it influences your art.
I'd say when he left the band, we streamlined.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly, because the drummer we got was not really a drummer, and
you're saying
Eric Bob Fay was like a really good friend of ours. And,
you know, it was yesterday when I realized that's Bob Fay from Christmas.
Yeah.
Whom I loved, that record, In Excelsior Dayglow. Just a fucking gem. And you can't even get it on Spotify because I looked.
Oh, man.
How great was Christmas? That album. Wonderful. Yeah. That whole scene.
Yeah, he was part of that whole scene.
That scene was so good. But so he's, I know what you mean though.
He could play a beat, and that's all. I was like, if you can play a beat, I'll play a 6-string guitar, and we make some. Because at that point, I was like,
make some alt-rock money.
Yeah, I was listening to a lot of garage rock around that time too, and I was like, man, we'll just keep the songs short so you can make it through the end of the song. You know, like 2.5 minutes tops. Like. You know, no like big middle sections.
When you're talking about garage rock, you're talking about like 60s punk garage rock, like versus like the the sort of Paisley underground resurgence.
Yeah, that's
great music then too as well. But
yeah, that's when I really got into playing bass with my fingers too, and getting I got my Mustang around that time, and then also just really getting into more post punk and bass styles. And
are you now tuned into kind of like this, what I'm calling this sort of resurgence of like post-punk or noise rock, and it's Chat Pile or, the resurgence of Jesus Lizard with their new record, which was up there with many of their classics, in my opinion. Or these bands from, Gilla Band from Ireland or any of these sort of or Idols, bands like that.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm really into that. They kind of reminded me, like the initial, you're like, oh, kind of sounds like Fugazi. And then
yeah.
I remember like in the 2000s, I was super excited because I really liked the way kids were embracing post-punk and bringing it back in the 2000s,
Like the dance punk, like the DFA stuff, like Rapture.
Yep.
When I heard Rapture, I'm like, this is just a Public Image cover band, and I'm here for it.
I loved it. I was
the first
so
EP in that
into
first record. Oh, so good.
And I was really into the Strokes and really into Interpol, but then also really into the Animal Collective. God, I was fucking obsessed with them. Yeah, I heard a band called Lifeguard, I think. I accidentally...
Yes, Lifeguard.
I stumbled upon them on Spotify and they had like no plays. And I was like, what is this? And I'm like, whoa, these are like these kids playing. I'm like, wow, I wonder if this will ever go. And then next thing I knew, they were signed to Sub Pop. I'm like, oh, okay. When I saw it was like literally a self-release. And I'm like, these kids, wow, this is an interesting path for a group of kids to play this almost obscure rep.
That is so rooted in early 80s influence. And it's like, how did they even stumble across this shit?
It's so cool. I mean, it's kind of like when the Black Lips happened. I'm like, this is great. They get it. I'm like, fucking A, they get it. Like, this isn't the Paisley Underground. This is like, they're going right to the grit. And I really, really loved that.
I'm pretty impressed with some of the stuff that Parquet Courts have done too. Like they seem to, not necessarily in the noise sense, but in just the way they sing and the way they compose songs and stuff. It was pretty important. And they're kind of out there on their own doing this stuff after that sort of early 2000s resurgence.
There was a really great Rough Trade compilation in the early aughts that it was like whatever the releases were then. I can't remember. It had like a really great Jeffrey Lewis song called "Don't Let the Record Label Take You Out to Lunch" on it. And it had Parquet Courts and then other stuff. And I was like, okay. I'm like, it's on. Like people. It was cool because I really thought that. I kind of felt like in the 90s, like that a lot of things got lost. I thought post punk got lost. I thought new wave got lost, and I thought indie rock was so aggressively unimaginative, and even something like Pavement, which I love Pavement.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like, well, then they imitate The Fall on this song. I was never you
think they were self-conscious about it, you mean?
I have no idea. I just didn't think that I just felt like indie rock felt very tame to me. Like indie rock to me was the least interesting music of the 90s. And then I say that because I thought I didn't think, like I said, I streamlined my own stuff in the 90s. Right. So I was, I felt I was a part of that. But when I started to do the folk implosion, that was more when I was like, I want to go back and reclaim these things that are much a part of me and then as well. But I remember Clinic in the 90s, that was like when they happened. When they opened for Sebadoh, I was like, oh, this is different. I was like, this is Clinic were the kind of the beginning of what I thought started to happen in the 2000s. And obviously it's still happening now. There's a band on Sub Pop called Omni who were like, really,
I love Omni.
Really?
From Atlanta, right?
I don't know where they're from. They're like,
there's a trio.
Really great guitar stuff. And even that band Real Estate a while back, like, and I heard that, I'm like, this is wonderful. This is like,
it's good stuff.
Like, Feelies, slovenly, like, those kind of ornate guitar bands from the 80s that that really weren't, didn't get too much attention back then either.
But, no. I mean, the Feelies could play the Ritz on Thanksgiving. And I always thought, holy shit, the Feelies are going to happen finally. Yeah. And it just, they never got bigger than that. And they're so deserving. I mean, they're so responsible for a lot of what we listen to now or what we're hearing now. I want to talk a bit about your podcast. You once, you've said and you say that one of the ways in which you admire current day Jay Mascis is the way he's done it right. He's got a studio in his attic where you guys record a lot of the newer Dinosaur records. He has assistants who help him record. Creativity is at the top of his pyramid. It seems like you feel like you were always trying to integrate your creative and your personal life. And so that's why when I came to Raw Impressions, which is the podcast that you do with Adelle, your wife, it felt like, okay, this is Lou integrating his life.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it also goes to like collaboration too. I mean, I love Adelle and our conversations were like from the very beginning when we were friends, and then when we became partners, it was just constantly talking and scheming and thinking of ideas, and and she wanted to do a podcast when we first got together, and that was in 2012, and I was like, oh, I can't possibly, because I'm like, you don't know what you're asking me. Like, you're like, if I was to do a podcast, I would need to have my 4-track.
Yeah.
It would take me hours to construct every single episode. I don't want any fucking guests.
Yeah.
I've got a whole list of things that I would want to do on top of playing acoustic songs. I would want to edit, craft every episode. I don't have time for that. But then, about 2.5 years ago, Ben Lee approached me. He was kind of trying his hand at being a pod father. Like he was going to have his own network, and he had actually
Ben Lee the musician.
Ben Lee the musician. He was doing Jello Biafra had a podcast through his network, and he's like, Lou, if you ever want to do a podcast, it'd be easy because you can do it through me, and I'll throw it up I'll distribute it and whatever. And it clicked at that time because it was just post-pandemic, and I had done so much at home, and my record Reason to Live was very much a home record, and I did all of these live performances from my house to make money, before anybody was getting any kind of assistance, even before I got assistance through the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I was paying my bills with live streams. And
yeah, I remember that period.
And that was very much involved with, my wife was totally involved in that. And then we started to do holiday specials, which we got really into, like making these video holiday, half-hour short things of, of like Christmas, and then doing skits, about homeschooling, and
yeah.
And then we did Valentine's Day, which was great, and St. Patrick's Day and Easter, and we did these 4 specials. So we had done that. I had done an album at home. I had been a part of something called the Artist Enabler series through my record label, which meant I had content. I had made a release every month. So I was in this very like kind of rolling, prolific, and also very irreverent, I would say. Like I think before that, and proceeding through the 90s and then into the 2000s, everything, releasing music had such weight to it. It's like, what's your next record? And here's your record, and here's your cycle, and here's your blah. Yeah. And I think through all of that, I lost what I considered so exciting about the early days of making cassettes and college radio and and fanzines. And but I think through the process of the pandemic, it loosened me to a degree that I was ready to make a podcast. So indeed, when we started to make our podcast, I spent hours and hours on every fucking episode. I did a whole month where I made up a new song every week. And like the songs that I made up were like, not just like, here I am playing it on acoustic. I mean, it was like, these were like multi-tracked, lo-fi fucking nightmares, just like, I totally took it so seriously, and then integrated my 4-track to such a degree that it's like, it's demented. I've had to learn how to balance it to just simply not drive myself crazy and make myself completely deaf. But, like this last week I spent, 3 or 4 days recreating the music from a after school special from 1976. Right. It's like, I'm like, Like I literally sat in my room. I relearned the theme of the I relearned the theme of the song, or I didn't relearn it, I learned it on synthesizer and then on guitar. And I sat and played it to myself for a whole fucking day. Added 3 verses to it, a whole middle part based on in this, and then I also spent almost a solid week recreating a Burger King commercial.
Yes.
So it could be perfectly lined up to the vintage commercial. Like I'll get these thoughts, and it's almost like I get scared of thinking, because if I think of something, I'll be like, shit. Like I'm like, I got it. Because thinking that I need to do a Cold Wave cover of What Do I Want by Husker Du. I'm like, fuck. Now I have to make a Cold Wave. And it's not going to be right until I run everything through the fucking 4-track. And then I'm like, oh God. So, but
what does Adele do when you get caught in these sort of like obsessive like spirals of I have to do this?
Oh, she's scared. She is scared. The Burger King commercial is like, it's kind of, it was an event in the house. It was the episode is really funny that we do, because she can track my sanity by my ponytail. Because I tie my hair back because I have so much fucking hair and I won't get a cut, which is why I covered cut your hair by Pavement when I was. That was when I covered Cut Your Hair by Pavement. That's when I stopped cutting my hair. But I spent a whole week, constructing a weird cover of Cut Your Hair. But yeah, she knows by the state of my hair, whether she can open the door and be like, oh no. Because I go into total fucking mad scientist mode to do the most like inconsequential things like that nobody cares about. I've done this for people. It happened early in the podcast where I'm very into the podcast, but initially I made the mistake of telling people that I was really into making my podcast, because when I would tell them, I would inevitably be like, well, you gotta see this. And then I would pull out, my laptop or my phone, and I would play them, my recreation of a baby doll commercial from 1972. And they would and you'd see people, and they're like, they don't even know that the music that I put to it is even a recreation. They're just like, you're just showing me. They're
just nodding.
They're nodding, having no idea.
Gentle smile.
Because to me, I am literally, I feel like I have like climbed Mount Everest by recreating like the Land of the Lost theme, which is this show that I'm sure you're familiar with. Yes. Like a Sid and Marty Krofft, weird, bizarre live action puppet monstrosity, like what I really wanted to do. But I recreate these things thinking that I have truly done like humanity a great service. And then I post them on like Instagram, and I'm like, oh man, this one, people are going to, and then it's just like nothing,
Welcome to the world of podcasting, by the way.
Exactly. And my wife and I, we go through times where we're like, dear God, like we'll do stuff. I'll do stuff that is so detailed, and we'll have conversations that leave us both so breathlessly laughing that we're like, okay, this must mean something. And right. And I think the thing that's so cool about it is that it keeps me so in touch with exactly why I ever started playing music in the first place. It's like, you're doing it, number one, for yourself, because in some way it's ordering your life, ordering your thoughts, and especially in days like these, and as we're growing older, and it serves the same purpose that it served me when I was a kid fucking around with portable tape recorders. And it's creating my own world. And with my wife, it's wonderful to do something with her and have something that's so collaborative, and it's fun to give each other pep talks about it, and it's fun to keep it going, even though it's not paying the bills. It's paying some. Actually, it's paying some, which I will.
I'm sure. It seems like you have good listenership, and I know that you have.
It probably pays our electric bill and about half of our health insurance every month. So that's pretty good.
Well, then everyone should start a podcast. I was going to ask you how it's changed your artistic process or your relationship with your wife, but you kind of answered that in your prior answers.
Yeah, I've been doing my demos too. I've been doing, when I was trying to figure out what I might bring to the table for the Dinosaur Jr. record, I've been playing demos for our audience, because we have people listening. So I do play it for them. And if I get a comment where someone's like, "That's really good," I'm like, "Great."
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. I've had an interesting run in my career in that, like, because everything that I've done has been so kind of all over the place, and also always with other people. So other people, everything is like a kind of a collaboration. I've never had everything in one basket. It's all like in all these different baskets, which is good in the sense that it keeps me really moving and not too precious about things.
Nimble, yeah.
But bad in the sense that if I'm really looking for validation, it's hard to cobble together the validation that a 58-year-old white male might need, and we need a lot of validation.
Protect us, please protect us.
I know we are such a endangered. Poor us,
Yeah.
Poor us.
Do you listen to any other podcasts?
I listen to Rich Roll, this guy who's like a total fucking self-help superhero guy, but he's exactly my age, and I think that's why I listen. He's exactly my age, and and basically his interviews are just commercials for people's books. Basically, authors come on and they talk about their books, and with a lot of people with agendas. So some of it I don't, but I really enjoy when he talks to women, and he talks to like professors and women athletes. And for some reason, I really find his interviews with women to be really fascinating. And because podcasting, and like so much of it is like information and agenda based, like, and my wife really likes Smartless, which is the three funny actors talking to each other, which is really entertaining. And I really like it I generally like things that are not so much like guest focused, right? When it's just when it's like the chemistry between people. And I love the 500. The history of rock and roll in 500 songs.
Yeah, 500 songs.
That guy is that shit is
He's smart.
Mind-blowing. The connections, like I just found out that Burt Bacharach was obsessed with experimental classical music when he was a kid. Like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like Cage and like Xenakis. There's a really heavy-hitting, super experimental classical music, experimental music from the late 50s and early 60s. And that was one of his early influences. And I'm like, what? Like that kind of shit blows my mind. Like I'm when you realize that the history of music is far more rich and complicated, and there's more cross-pollination than you can even imagine. I mean, just even within like racial politics within music, within like it speaks so much about the diversity of our culture is really played out in the way that the music is made, and it's always shock. I mean, that guy really, the way that he delves into things and the stories. I mean, his episode about Louie Louie was by the Kingsmen was like, that song, I love this because it underlines almost my whole concept of music and my belief in music. There was a DJ in Boston who every week would play the worst song in the world. Like, this was his thing. This week is the worst song of the world. And he would find these recordings and play, and people were just... So he found the Kingsmen's Louie Louie, because Louie Louie had become like a little tradition among garage bands in the Pacific Northwest. It had migrated from LA. It was written by a black songwriter in LA. It all culminated when this guy in Boston played that record by the Kingsmen as the worst record in the world. And then when he played it on that, the calls started coming in Boston, and it became a regional hit in Boston because everybody wanted to hear the worst song in the world. And then it took over and became a huge hit for a bunch of fucking high schoolers.
And then resurged with Animal House, right? Meant that it had a second life when that movie came out.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, anyway, that's a podcast.
Yeah,
I'll listen to,
well,
you know. So
you learned a lot from it. Oh, well, that's good to know.
I love it. I mean, I have to actually restrict how much podcast I listen to because it's too much goddamn information. It's too much.
There's never too many podcasts, Lou, but you've been an incredible guest on this one, and it is great to have you on. We can't have this show without having Lou Barlow on, so I'm really glad that you're able to make this happen with us.
Yeah.
And really looking forward to, it sounds like a new Dinosaur record. I wonder, probably some other of your projects are going to be putting out some new records soon. Okay.
Yeah,
we'll keep listening. But I am going to urge people to listen to Raw Impressions because, I mean, I was just listening last night and I learned things about Does It Float from the first Dinosaur album that I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I have like it's pretty incredible. Like I played almost 70 original songs on the podcast and songs of Dinosaur songs in it. And it's like, there's still more. I'm like, wow, I haven't. So it's like, it's kind of great. It's fun. It's exciting when people care.
Yeah, no, it is. I do. It's great. I urge people to listen to it after they listen to this episode, of course. But thanks again for your time today. You've been really generous with it, and it's a long time in coming. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks, Andy.
All right. I got to thank Lou Barlow for digging deep and giving us a sort of soul-bearing interview you'd expect from a seasoned podcaster. I don't even know which of his bands to plug, but you really need to listen to all of them or catch them on the road this summer. I think they're all going to be touring, maybe at the same time. As always, we appreciate your positive reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you tell people about things. And if you want to request a guest, sure, write to us at fourstringspod@gmail.com. That's FOUR stringspod@gmail.com. And if you happen to have a hookup with a world historical pod-worthy bass player, definitely hit us up. We will be celebrating the new season with a special sweepstakes that will have particular relevance to performing bassists out there. We'll kick that off on the next episode in our monosyllabic mini-season. Until then, keep on thumping.
Audiation.